Frans.
Greetings, colleagues in the studio, Frans Rammutla, Makuluve, and Devesh Mothilall. Greetings, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, friends of Cometsa and the listeners. Welcome to our Tuesday series. My name is Tsima. This is Cometsa Radio Worldwide, the mind, the journey, the destiny. We apply our mind to the journey that takes us to our destiny. Our shows are based on the principle called the idea. We inform and entertain, develop and educate, empower, associate, and network. We are an African online radio station with a global reach, streaming live from Johannesburg, Gauteng province of the Republic of South Africa. Wherever you are, whether it's morning, evening, day, you are welcome. Today we continue with our conversation around unit number 13, conduct 8, and it's about the art of following up in a live conversation. We have invited Ndate Frans Rammutla to touch on the 7 principles of social work. But that will come once we have allowed everyone to say their opening remarks and greeted the listeners. Maynard is not with us today. He's traveling, flying out of the province, flying back at the moment, and hopefully he will listen online. Greetings, Devesh. How are you?
Evening, Sam. I'm okay, but I have a little bit of a flu. but the show must go on. Devesh Mothilall. I'm an engineer by profession. I'm a resident DJ of Cometsa, and I join Sam every Tuesday, bringing to you the do's and don'ts of the digital online streaming mastery program which Cometsa has been offering, of which I'm a graduate. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you very much. I hope you cope. It's the winter time here in South Africa. Many of us are having some cold. I hope you're taking some right medication, keeping warm so that it doesn't overcome you completely. Greetings to you. Thanks for joining the show tonight. We're looking forward to your contribution. Say hi to the listeners and a few liners about yourself.
Good evening, listeners. Yes, I'm Frans Rammutla. I am the former president of South African Black Social Workers Association, which transitioned into National Association of Social Workers in South Africa, to which I also became the president. Yeah, for the rest of my career, I've been an advocate of social work mobilization. And even when I'm at home now, no longer working, as Prasem always say, I've not retired, but I am recharging.
And
I still have an interest in social work issues. And tonight we will be talking about the top 7 principles of social work, looking at listening ability as a precondition for effective follow-up. Yes, I'm looking forward to the show, listeners, and Prasem, Devesh. Yeah, let's see how the show continues, but I'm looking forward.
indeed, it's always a pleasure, Dr. Rammutla, to have you in the studio because we have such an interesting history, you and I. When you talk about social work, I mean, we can't help it but talk about the forerunner to all these organizations, the South African Black Social Workers Association. I get some nostalgia when I start talking of such organizations.
I know, Prasem.
Hey, wow, that's why you are here, and history will always be there to remind us of where we all started, right?
Yes.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, today I'm very happy that we are here together in the Mutla, but I'm going to let Devesh at the time when we talk about the 7 principles to engage you a little bit more on them because he is a resident anchor and DJ and host. So I'm not necessarily the only one that drive this this platform. And Devesh?
Yes, indeed, Brasem. But before we, dive into today's actual topic or area of focus, Unit 13, Conduct 8, indeed, as a resident DJ, you always want to deliver as much knowledge as possible. When we've had lots of very interesting guests, and not to say any least, with the guests that we also have tonight, which really can share some of that nostalgic history and skills that he has acquired with our listeners.
Indeed. Yeah, so we want I mean you have rightly said that we're eating this big elephant in chunks in terms of mastery of holding conversations, talk shows. Um, you know, the unit itself is very small in the bigger scheme of things. But I believe very strongly that it is fundamental if you are to have a very fruitful engagement with the guest, especially when you want to make sure that the inputs that are coming from the guest are edified and magnified. Why is it important to be such a very good listener for following up in conversations? And that is basically the focus of this conversation, and continue from where we left it last night. And we did emphasize that listening is very important. And that was at that point that Rammutla brought in the 7 principles of social work. And maybe if you don't mind, Devesh, to give you the context based on what we discussed, and then maybe let's not waste in Datara Muta's time to link it to what we have learned as the key techniques we need to use from a listening perspective.
Not a problem, Sam. Indeed, the previous show that we did last night, we did emphasize the importance of listening. It might sound simple and easy to our listeners, but the art of listening is actually very dynamic, especially if you talk about online digital streaming, where what we've said in our previous shows is that you have to maintain this level of a vibration between yourself and the guest and make sure that that vibration reaches our listeners out there. And one of the aspects of maintaining that vibration is the art of listening, where you can actually listen to the gestures, you can listen to the words, and the tone, as well as some of the messaging, or even the moments of silence that is experienced when you're having a conversation with the guest. And how does that relate to the area of focus which Mr. Rammutla is going to talk to us about tonight as well? Is that these skills of listening actually is about how you are sensing the show, how the show is moving, how your messaging is moving between yourself, your guest, and the listeners out there, and also in terms of being able to have that sense which we mentioned, that vision. Even though you're not seeing your guest, you're not seeing your listeners, but being able to gauge how something is going and whether it's going in the way that you had planned or whether it's going in a way that you needed to take certain actions.
Indeed, indeed. But the follow-up itself, I think there are many ways that a follow-up can be applied. In Lekgotla, we have this principle which says that sometimes a follow-up it could be just be an acknowledgement of what the person before you has said. But in practical terms, follow-up means that you are reflecting on the messages that you've heard, and you are either following up by asking questions or by agreeing or affirming what has been said, or even expatiating. However, there's an element of sensitivity there that your follow-up should not really be creating more confusion. Rather, it should be actually be helping the understanding of the listeners. I think sometimes if we are not conscious of that, we could be actually complicating the situation by unnecessary following up. Under what circumstances do you find follow-up to be very, very helpful? And under what circumstance do you find follow-up not being that much helpful? Maybe let's hear that Rammutla before we tackle the various aspects or attributes of a very good listener in a conversation. Rammutla.
Thank you very much, Prasem. I just want to confirm that in social work, we're dealing with counseling. And as we do counseling with our clients, yes, we are observing different gestures, words, tones, and even you look at the movement of the movement of the client. So yes, in social work we have top 7 principles.
We'll come to that. I'm just actually also wanted to just give the context why we saw the need for these 7 principles to be brought in. We are acknowledging the fact that all the professions that deal with exchange and engagement with among people will actually require very good listening. Coaching is one of those. Counseling, as Ndate Rammutla has mentioned, one of those. Mentoring, or even in training or in conflict resolution as well. So it's not just these are the attributes that you need to have only for conversation, but it's also in all those aspects. But here specifically, we want to see what we can borrow from the top 7 principles that Ndate Rammutla is going to address and bring them into creating consciousness and awareness for us who are charged with the responsibility of holding dialogues, conversations, holding the space and edifying and inspiring our guests by being very good in terms of follow-up. If I put, given the right context to the conversation, Devesh?
Yeah, I would agree with you, Sam. And what I would add is if we put in a scenario so our listeners can also have a better or different view of the point that we're trying to share. As we've mentioned in our previous shows, you do a lot of planning. And we've also articulated to the listeners that you have to develop a skill. Even though we as the Digital Online Streaming Mastery Program would teach you a lot of skills, those skills you have to enhance through practice. And as I mentioned, we do plan the shows, but when the shows are taking place, sometimes the plans do not go according to the script that you might have established and discussed with your guest. So one of the tools that we use is that of listening, where you can listen to the messaging that the guest is giving. And one situation where you would want to ask the guest or probe the guest to delve a little deeper is when you hear him saying something which you believe has a sense of reverberation which the audience would be very interested in hearing more about. So by you actually listening actively to what the guest is saying and having planned the conversations that you might have with the guest, you might pick up to say, okay, no, this is a point which you need to get the guest to talk a little bit more about. And likewise, you might have, through your own listening skills, find that there might be a point which the guest is already spoken enough about, and you need to then move the conversation into a new area of discussion, Sam.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. I'm going to let you and Devesh Mothilall to start. I'm very excited about these 7 principles because when Devesh Mothilall mentioned them yesterday, I said, wow, I wasn't quite aware. Maybe I should take a back seat here and actually be a student and be taught by our expert social worker who also happened to be part of our broadcasting team. Mr. Frans Rammutla. Over to you. If you don't mind, and Dr. Rammutla to unpack them very slowly, one by one, and Devesh and I will interject to expatiate more in what we can.
Thank you. Thank you very much, President. Before I delve into the 7 principles, maybe let me just briefly indicate from the social work perspective our understanding of what principles are. So yes, in our profession, principles are declarations of what to do and what not to do to achieve the best results while conducting social work. They serve as reference points for professionals performing field work. To conduct a profession, principles are elaborations of ideals in the form of understandable words. As we will see, the principle of belief in an individual's or a group's or a community self-determination, for example, express the value of dignity and worth of a person. In social work, Prasam and Devesh, the value of dignity and worth of a person is very important because when that person comes to you, he comes to you as very vulnerable. But once he realizes that you are looking at his dignity and worth, then he becomes very much relaxed and feel very good.
So basically, you are saying that whether a person is sick or is well, or is learning or is not learning, whenever you engage with them, you first have to acknowledge their dignity and their identity to make them feel self-worth.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think Sam and Frans, if we not to belittle the area of focus of social work and the principles thereof, but when I look at the principles you delving into and apply it to the digital online streaming, it ties in very nicely with the previous show where we talked about affirmations and being able to bring the best out of the guest or the co-host that you might have on the show, Sam?
Yeah, absolutely. It is exactly for that reason why I felt that let's take a backseat and learn from this other profession. Thank you so much. Carry on in that day, Frans.
Yes, we are also informed that a principle is a verbalized statement of an observed uniformity in the context of a particular class of objects. So, the mechanism by which we move from one circumstance to another, they constitute principles.
So is it a law or is it a code or is it a behavioral guideline?
I think it's a behavioral guideline.
Okay.
Yes, the behavioral guidelines. So the mechanism by which we move from one circumstance to another are principles, obviously, which are general rules or laws or conceptions or fundamental truth and universally accepted tenets. So I think I need to indicate now to zoom the principles in relation to what social work is briefly. We are informed that social work is a subject that determines the interrelationship between theory and practice. I think here, each and every profession application tries to relate theory and to link theory and practice. And we're informed that theories always help to improve social functioning. Yes, in social work, every person that comes to us for assistance, you find that his social functioning is impaired. And working with them will improve a healthy social functioning. So social work profession promotes social change, problem solving in human relationships, and the empowerment and liberation of people to enhance well-being. It means it's very holistic in its approach.
So, and that is the context you are painting for us before we then delve into each principle by principle. Am I getting you right?
Yes, Professor. Yes.
So it is quite a very fragile and sensitive environment in which you find the profession working, and therefore these principles are designed to comply with that fragility of the environment, which could be the same way, Devesh, bringing somebody into the studio, you have taken them out of the comfort zone into a space that they may not be familiar with, but you as the host, you are very homely.
Yes, Sam, and for me, this is also a guide, do's and don'ts. But if you really, in the relation to social work, if you really want to do your very best, get the patient or the client to also allow themselves to do their very best, you would have these guiding 7 principles which would allow you to be as ethical as possible from your side and effective as possible. And of course, the client to be able to get the best service as possible, Sam.
Beautiful. Thanks, Rammutla. Thanks, Devesh.
Indeed. And then we are told utilizing theories into the practice of human behavior and social systems. It means here we intervene at the points where people interact with the environment. Nowadays, we are talking about the ecosystem, which brings into the picture the question of people interacting with their environment. Principles of human rights and social justice are fundamental to social work. It is a helping profession which is conducted with a variety of methods, including both primary and secondary methods. This is the context, Prasam, before we go to the 7 principles.
Wow, that point is valuable. You know, the human rights aspect. So you basically conscientizing me here and my friend Devesh that you don't bring people into the studio. I'm trying to link this to make it relevant to what we are about. So Devesh, what I'm reading here is, if we were to borrow from social work, you don't bring people into the open space like media or platform where everybody else is listening to belittle them, but you bring them in with that understanding that their rights must not be trampled upon by you hosting the show. So that's almost like that point we're saying that you need to you have to be very conscious about what you are doing to this guest that you are engaging with.
Definitely, Sam. The way I also see it, and another analogy I could possibly share with our listeners, And correct me though if I'm wrong, Frans. If we look at the times of COVID, and we could not have our social workers going to their clients, especially those in rural areas, some of the opportunities would be to use technology such as a telephone or broadcast technology, or have one-on-one sessions with your client, but through electronic communications devices. So when you look at the principles, which Frans will take us through in detail in a moment, as well as some of the lessons, the do's and don'ts, which we've been sharing through our digital online streaming mastery program thus far, we will definitely see that synergy that I also find with the 7 principles of social work, which Frans is taking us through, as well as the modules which we've already discussed thus far, Sam.
Why I'm so happy about this is, as Frans is saying, that this is really about of social function where people come together. There are many places where people come together, and those are exactly the places where the human rights are trampled upon. Even these new platforms we're talking about. That's why I feel so excited that Rammutla comes through at this point while we are so early in on our journey, that we must not forget that this is a platform where people come into contact with each other. And what is fundamental to that interaction is the human rights that is talking about, and these principles that is going to share with us. That actually makes us also to be open to each other, and for our counterpart to feel comfortable that we are not actually judging them, we are not actually embarrassing them. We hold them high so that they can bring their best into the picture and share what they have to share with us without feeling that they are being undermined. Am I putting it right, Dr. Rammutla? And I think we need to allow you now to really share the principles with us.
No, I think you're having it right, and Devesh observation was correct that during COVID, social workers used to work at home, and they were using the technology, they were using their phones, and they were using the Teams to communicate amongst themselves, and also to communicate with the clients. So yeah, the 7 principles of social work is the principle of acceptance, principle of individualization, principle of communication, principle of determination, principle of confidentiality, principle of non-judgmental attitude that we spoke about yesterday, and the principle of controlled emotional involvement. So when I go to the first principle of acceptance, it tells us that in order to achieve optimal result, both the client and the social work practitioner must accept each other. This is very important. The client must accept the worker because the worker is assisting the client in overcoming his or her problem condition. So in the social work circumstances, the client may approach the social worker directly, the agency may designate the social worker, or someone may refer the client to the social worker. So unless the client believes that the social worker has the capability to comprehend his or her predicament and is interested in assisting him or her in resolving the problem, the client may refuse to cooperate in the relationship in which the social intervention is to be planned.
Mr. Rammutla, let's hold it there. So now I understand the context under which a social worker gets assigned to go and help the client. Now let's assume that is done. Now we're talking in this case in relation to what we want to learn from. So now let's focus on the social worker and the client. I like the fact that you use the word client because we're not talking about a sick somebody. For a social worker, that person is a client, right?
Yes.
And they are sitting next to each other. It's similar to Devesh sitting opposite the guest and holding a conversation. And now, uh, talk to this principle. The two of them have to understand that they have to accept each other as they are. Is that right? If you can sit
Yes.
there, let's all not worry about who sent the social worker to the client. They are there now facing each other. They've got to deal with each other. The client needs help, the social worker needs to help the client. How does this principle of acceptance play itself in real life scenario?
Would it be synonymous with, in our broadcast type of language, role acceptance, where you as the host should know what your role is and what you need to do, what the role of the guest is, as well if you had a co-host. And of course, in the social work situation, you might have an assistant in terms of the social worker. Would it be synonymous to that kind of role acceptance, Frans?
Yes, it is synonymous with that. Much as I've indicated the behavior of the client during the interview. So the social worker must also acknowledge the client as a person with a problem who has come to him or her for assistance. So this is regardless of the client's look or history. The worker should accept the client just as he or she is.
Mm, mm, mm.
So
It looks like this principle of acceptance is the fundamental one because if they don't accept each other, there's actually no synergy.
yes, indeed. And we are informed here that acceptance of the client may not be hampered by the worker's personal experience.
Mm.
Although sometimes when you bring personal experiences, it also enhances it enhances the problem-solving process.
Mm.
So they're saying a worker who was abused as a child, or his or her alcoholic father. Indeed, he may find it difficult to accept an alcoholic client who has come for help in mending his or her family bonds.
Mm.
So in this scenario,
So,
the social worker should not be influenced by his or her early experience of being abused by an alcoholic father,
mm.
whom he or she despised and rejected, and should not demonstrate hatred or indifference to the client.
Mm.
So finally, mutual acceptance is the first step in creating a good professional relationship with the goal of resolving the client's social dysfunction. As we have just said right now, Brasem, that the principle of acceptance is the one that informs all other principles, all other 6 principles. So here is this principle of individualization. At the foundation of social work practice, it is the belief in the uniqueness of the individual and his or her intrinsic value. So once we accepted the client as he is, now we are looking at the uniqueness of the client and his or her intrinsic value. So each individual's nature is capable of integrating and directing its own forces in a manner distant from that of any other individual's nature. So each and every person is unique.
Mm.
The social worker regards each client's problem as unique and works with the client to find the most satisfactory way for him or her to deal with his or her personal problem circumstances. This principle reminds the social worker that when interacting with the client, he or she is not dealing with an inanimate object or a lower entity.
Mm.
because the client was unable to find a solution to his or her problem, he or she should not be regarded as a person devoid of dignity, worth, or value. So we must respond, we must respect the client.
Mm.
So can I go to principle?
I like the idea of individualization or uniqueness. So basically, Devesh and I, as the host of the show, we can't say last week we had this whole show and he was so great in 1, 2, 3. Now, come this week, we now expect this week's client or guest to now live up to that uniqueness of the other person. That will defeat this particular principle, in my view, if we were to borrow again from the social work fraternity.
Indeed, indeed.
And I think it also talks to the issue of, this skill that you need to develop where you need to sense the vibration of the stakeholders, that whether it's in the social work environment or whether it's in the broadcast environment, where you need to affirm, you need to get the client to open up, to gain that trust, and also to feel that you see them as an individual. You don't just see them as a expert in energy field, for example, or the energy field itself. You do see them as a person. And of course, in the social worker perspective, they need to feel as if you are dealing with them only and with their issues only. You are not dealing with the whole caseload of people with challenges. You do see them and not just the issues that they're carrying, Prasam.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you, Devesh. Yeah, you can carry on to the next principle.
But before that, we are informed that this issue of the client feeling that he is not worthwhile or is not of any value or not of dignity reflects the attitude of the community. So the client believes that he or she is worthless human being and develop a negative self-image by himself.
Mm.
So as a loving and assisting professional, the social worker should feel that the client is an individual with dignity, worth, and respect, and given the correct environment and encouragement, he or she has the potential to emerge from his or her unwanted position with dignity and respect. So this is the role that the social worker must play to make sure that the client feel very much accepted. So yeah, let's go to principle number 3, communication. So the communication between the social worker and the client is critical in social work. So this communication can be either verbal or non-verbal, using gestures, signs, or actions to convey a message. This is in line with what Devesh said earlier on, that listening is the ability or a precondition for effective follow-up. So the gestures will guide you as to what follow-ups to do. So the majority of human relation issues originate as a result of inadequate communication. A message is sent by the sender and received by the receiver in communication. So true communication occurs when the meanings of the phrases and other symbols used and acted upon by the sender and receiver are shared and have the same meanings. So communication is fluid if the sender's message is appropriately or correctly understood by the receiver.
Mm.
Yes, indeed, this applies practically. When you communicate, and it goes hand in hand with the ability to listen so that you are able to make a follow-up.
Mm.
So as you send the message, it must be very clear to the client, so that when she responds, her response is clear to you as well, and you are able to make correct follow-ups.
And I guess you should also be able to observe the kind of responses it generates from your partner.
Indeed.
Listening means also being attentive and observant of how your message is received and what reactions it generates from the other person.
Indeed, that's why the social worker should be able to understand the client's verbal and non-verbal communication, because this is very important in social work relationships, since the clients and the workers' histories may differ, as may their mental states. Yeah, this is very important.
And I think, Frans and Brasem, like we've mentioned in some of our other shows, some of the tools and do's and don'ts modules that we go through on a weekly basis actually can help you in your life. It doesn't necessarily have to be only for the purposes of online broadcast and only in relation to our focus area of becoming online broadcasters. There's things that we learn, like this issue of being able to really hone in your listening skills, being able to sense vibrations from your client, from your guest, especially in the role of a social worker. That becomes more critically necessary, because you are often dealing with life and death situations, and you may not have that client, or in our broadcast language, the guest, who actually will be readily opening up to you and being able to tell you, in a fluent manner what the issues are. Brasem?
Indeed. So I get the sense that next time when we are looking for people to join our pool of show anchors and hosts, we have a captive market here in the form of social workers.
Yes, indeed.
Let us go to the fourth principle of confidentiality.
Yes. Say it again.
Let's go to the fourth principle of confidentiality. We dealt a lot with it yesterday. Much as we said the acceptance is a foundation, but here we are told that this principle serves as a solid foundation for the appropriate application of social work intervention. Indeed. We are informed that it contributes to the development of a solid worker-client relationship. It's critical in social work to supply information to the worker. This can range from simple factual information to highly confidential information. A person may be unwilling to discuss specific facts about his or her personal life with anyone unless the person with whom the information is given is trustworthy. He must be confident that the worker will not use it to cause discomfort, ridicule, or damage to his or her reputation. So, the worker encounters certain difficulties in adhering to this guideline. So, should the confidential information be shared with other agency officials involved in the case, as well as colleagues, professional social workers who may be able to assist the worker in resolving the client's problem? It's a question. Second, what should he do with some information regarding the client's criminal activity, which he may be compelled to provide to investigation agency whenever he is asked as a responsible citizen? Another question. In the first situation, the social worker may reveal the information in the client's best interest. However, in the latter scenario, it is extremely difficult for the social worker to withhold information because it was given with the guarantee of confidentiality.
Mm. Mm. Mr. Rammutla, am I hearing right? You right that you are referring to social worker as a worker. Is that the worker in the name social work, or is it the worker in the understanding that social worker in many cases are not entrepreneurs and are not self-employed? They normally work for a particular organization. I'm just curious.
No, as I indicated earlier on, that social work is a profession practiced by social workers.
Mm.
Yes.
So when you say the worker, you're referring to that practitioner.
The social work practitioner, yes.
Okay, all right. I'm just trying to clarify there because somebody that might be listening might be wondering, who is this worker? So we're talking about the social work practitioner.
Yes.
Okay. If we can just use that rather, just replace the worker with the practitioner and or social worker, at least it makes it easy for listeners to follow that we are talking social worker who is a professional practitioner helping a client who might be any other person.
Well, because we are popular in the community, the listeners understand who the social worker is.
I think Sam is exercising the skill of factual listening.
Indeed.
I think the principle of confidentiality as well. When I listen to it from the view of the social worker or from the practitioner, I also see that when you discuss and plan with your guest,
Yeah.
you agree what you're going to talk about, and you don't ambush your guest. You may
Yeah.
have some information about him which he hasn't agreed to you that we must discuss it in the show. So the principle of confidentiality definitely also ties into the do's and don'ts, which we would also have in our online broadcasting environment.
Indeed, indeed. I was actually going to ask you, Devesh, where do you see this principle applying? Thank you very much for answering that before I could even ask it, and you clarifying it, that once you are in the studio, there's nothing confidential what you discuss. But prior, when you are researching your guest and asking for their profile, you may not be at liberty just to share anything that they give. You need to check with them.
And I was exercising my generative listening skills.
Indeed. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dinesh. Very well done.
For the purpose of your suggestion, the listeners must understand that we will use the social worker as a social work entrepreneur.
Yeah. Okay, beautiful.
Practitioner, sorry, social work practitioner.
Great.
So the fifth principle is that of self-determination, where the client's right to self-determination is emphasized by this idea. Every individual has the right to determine what is best for him or her and to choose the method by which to achieve it. In other words, it emphasizes that the social practitioner should not force decisions or solutions on the client merely because he or she has sought assistance from him or her. So without doubt, the client has gone to the social worker because he or she has been unable to manage the situation on their own. So the social worker should promote and include the client in making excellent and acceptable judgments by supporting and guiding him or her in developing right insights about his or her social environment. The client is thus assisted not only in realizing his or her potential, but also in feeling independent and like a person of worth and dignity. Only through social responsibility, emotional adjustment, and personality development is it possible to develop social responsibility, emotional adjustment, and personality development. That's the principle of self-determination.
So independence there is underlying factor. So in our case, Devesh, the guest is free to believe in what they believe and be allowed to do so.
Yes, and of course, we've got another module, but not in this module today, where we look at how to disagree with the guest.
Yes.
Even though he's an expert, the self-determination sometimes may not be aligning to his best message that he can give to our listeners. So again, it's our skills of listening that we can also guide him in terms of him making the best, determinations in terms of what's being delivered, sir.
Yeah, and do that with dignity.
Yes.
Honor and dignity. Our sixth principle is principle of non-judgmental attitude. So the non-judgmental attitude principle assumes that the social worker should enter the professional interaction without prejudice. That is, he should not develop any judgment on the client, whether positive or negative, worthy or undeserving. So he or she must treat the client as though he or she has come to him or her for assistance. And he or she must be willing to assist the client without being swayed by others' judgments about the client or his or her predicament. It's just like that one that said the social worker must not bring his or personal experiences into the counseling process. So this allows the worker to establish a solid professional relationship because both the worker and the customer are free to express their comprehension of each other. It should be stressed, however, that a non-judgmental attitude does not exclude making professional judgments regarding the problem scenario and the various solutions being evaluated. Is that the principle of non-judgmental?
I like that fact that it doesn't exclude the professional. What do you say? Judgment, a professional.
Yes.
Say that
Judgments,
again?
yes, regarding the problem scenario and the various solutions being evaluated.
Beautiful. I know we're running out of time, but I can imagine a meeting of anchors and hosts together with guests or subject matter experts having to discuss this. That could be a whole day workshop.
Indeed.
And just a quick experience I can share. I was listening on a Metro radio station hosted show where they were interviewing all the youth leaders from all the political parties and to talk about the involvement of the youth in the future of the South African Definitely, the host did exercise the non-judgmental attitude, and that's been expressed here, Sam.
Yeah, beautiful. And we are more conscious when it comes to political debates or religious debates, but we tend to forget sometimes when it comes to so perceived less sensitive topics. But that should apply across the board, irrespective of the nature of the discussion.
Indeed.
Yeah. So the last principle is that of controlled emotional involvement. So the notion of regulated emotional engagement protects social workers from becoming too emotionally invested in their clients' problems or becoming too objective. In the first example, the worker may over-identify with the client base because they see many parallels between the client's problem situation and other life situation or with the client's personality. This could jeopardize the professional relationship as well as judgments regarding the client's issue. The worker may become to sympathize with the client by overindulging in the client's life, which may infringe on the client's right to self-determination. So, in conclusion, Devesh and Prasem, in the latter circumstances that I've just painted, the client may get the impression that the worker is uninterested in them and their situation because the person is too objective and distant. This could prevent the customer from disclosing all the secret information. The client's sentiments of worthlessness and helplessness could be reinforced. All of this could lead to the professional partnership ending prematurely. As a result, even while sympathizing with the client, the social worker should keep a reasonable emotional distance. They should convey that they understand the client's situation without seeming pitiful or uncaring. So yes, these are the 7 top principles of social work, Prasem, Devesh.
Thank you, Prof. Frans. And that last principle that you spoke of definitely resides or resounds with that of emotional listening, which is one of the different skill sets that we look at when we talk about the COMETSA's digital online streaming mastery program. What do you think as well, Sam?
Indeed. The same applies to us as when we're hosting shows, that we can't be emotionally involved in the topic and hope to remain objective in the holding of the space. And this is fantastic. I really want to thank Mr. Rammutla for bringing this principle. And I'm really learning a lot. Some of these things are common in our profession of coaching as well. And I think it's a nice addition to this unit, Devesh, on following up in conversation, because that assumes that you have this in control, and therefore when you're following up, you are not defying any of these principles, which are also the do's and don'ts in our entire program. Absolutely.
Yes.
Wow, it's only time that is on our way now. That is pressurizing us. But I really, really want to once again thank our listeners for showing interest in this. And thanks, Mr. Rammutla and Devesh, for really going through the 7 principles. I am enlightened today, and I'm sure the listeners are as well. So let me remind the listeners that this is our weekly series, and also invite them to join us next week when we look at unit number 14, conduct number 9. Exactly the one that Devesh was highlighting earlier on. We are going to talk about challenging with dignity. So this equips you with the ability to challenge viewpoints respectfully, fostering a culture of constructive criticism. And we are growing indeed, colleagues. Thank you so much. Yeah, that was a show on unit number 13, conduct 8 on follow-up, basing purely on the 7 principles of social work, adding to our own content that we have shared with you, and we continue to do so as there's all these various conducts and units.